Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Smith, the Action Coach firm owner here in the St. Louis, Missouri area. And I'd like to introduce Brett Schnitger today and have him introduce his company and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Brett Schnitger. I'm the CEO and partner of Stars Design Group. We've been in business about 23 years. We help clients in the apparel space design, develop, and produce product from 67
Great.
factories in 14 countries.
Wow, that is very impressive. And you're out of the St. Louis area?
We are out of the St. Louis area. We've got offices here in St. Louis. We've got a couple in India, one in China, one in Bangladesh, one in Ethiopia, a small office in France, looking
Wow.
at Vietnam.
Great international company. So I'd like to go through and ask you a few questions about your experience, Brett, and just be as genuine as you can with the answers. So one of the things I always like to ask is, you've got some experience under your belt, obviously, and you've got quite a business there. So what would you do differently if you had to start from square one in business again? What's the advice
My
you'd give
God,
someone?
everyone, hindsight's always 2020. I would try not to make all the mistakes that I did, but that's what creates wisdom, I suppose. The double-edged sword of learning mistakes
Right.
the hard way.
That's right.
I think over the years, visionary moves have, without thinking methodically through each and every step, have got me in trouble over the years. You always look back and you go, my God, if I would just have more information, I probably wouldn't have done that. Every entrepreneur is a visionary to a degree. And I would say,
Right.
Looking back, it'd be great to have more sounding boards when you go
Right.
charging down a new country or a new opportunity and really think those things through.
Right. Great. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So I know that you're an employer. So here comes the really hard questions, I think, which are mostly about employees. One of the things I learned, there's a paper written by Elliot Jackson. He actually said, we hire employees, but unfortunately human beings show up to work, right? And so when you think about what are some of the biggest learnings that you've had as an employer since you began your business?
God, that's interesting. I've had highs and lows along that path. You're right. Human beings are messy, me included. And I would tell you that, you learn some great lessons that empowering the right people, training them, educating them, guiding them, but not overcorrecting too much. You develop some really fantastic individuals that, if they have a passion for the business, they really help. At our company, it's not me, it's we. And I really believe that people make things work. At the same time, you can give responsibility to individuals that don't necessarily earn it. And if you kind of lead with your heart and you think, God, they're going to come around, or you kind of overlook some warning signs, you can pay a terrible price for some of those people too. And so, the learning that I've had over the years is, you've really got to keep your finger on the pulse of individuals. You've really got to understand them. And there are good and bad out there, and you keep the good and you make better decisions on removing the bad more quickly. They can really mess up a culture, I can tell you, if you have the wrong people in the wrong place.
That brings up another question. So what qualities do you look for in employees to make sure that you do have a positive and productive work environment? What are some of the things that you've implemented?
Yeah, over the years, those parameters have changed. Early in the years, you wanted a fresh young mind that loved the business, that wanted to learn it. In our business, there's not a lot of education, so it's kind of learning on the job. And you wanted to have a certain degree of intelligence, a certain amount of self-motivation, getting things done, problem solving, all those elements. As I've continued now 30 years in this business, the one thing that I've added to that also is someone that is a protector of company culture, people that care enough to work with others and aren't disruptors. And I think that, you can have people that are high energy and high executors, but if they have some problems from a personality point of view, they can cause disruption in the organization. As much as you look at things that results that can happen from those high performers, you many times down the road, you see some pretty heavy collateral damage by people that have a lot of challenging baggage. And that's sometimes a very
Excellent.
tough
Thank you
decision to
for
make.
sharing that. Right. And sometimes we hire employees that we think are one way, and as we get to know them, we find out they're much different, right?
Oh my
That
God.
always happens to us.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
So one of the things we do as coaches, we work a lot with different types of assessments. Do you use any of those assessments for your key people or your leadership, like DISC or E-Colors, Myers-Briggs, any of those different
I've done
assessments?
those in the past and they've been somewhat effective. I think sometimes people want to answer what they think you want,
Right.
for a job. I have,
Mhm.
for my key positions now, I used to leave it in the hands of others.
Mhm.
And I would go in and do a quick interview and I think, hey, if this person's better, then I'm good.
Yeah.
Recently, with a number of hires that I've had recently, I've literally taken an hour to 2 hours, which is a lot of time to really get to know that person, to really get
Right.
past through kind of that surface level interview
Right.
kind of banter and really try to understand the person's history, their career trajectory. I ask the tough questions, where are your weaknesses? And that's always a tough question
Yeah.
to answer, but you don't stop there. You kind of continue to drill down. And I think
Right.
that's helped me make better decisions in hiring than ever before.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like you're doing some behavioral type interviews, right? Where you're trying to get past the qualifications, et cetera. What's the behavioral tendencies of that person based on the culture you talked about you like to develop. So
Well,
does
and,
that sound
and
like
and learning where they think their successes and failures were over the past, and that helps you kind of understand culturally, or it helps you understand the strengths and weaknesses that they might provide to your organization. And when you're hiring some very senior level positions, there can be a very, very fine line between making a decision between one or the other. And
right?
unless you spend considerable time, I think, with someone, you might miss that nuance that could really affect the outcome positively or negatively.
Great. So we talked a little bit about all the different offices that you have, throughout the world and the work that you do. So what do you attribute your growth to in this highly competitive marketplace that we have today, the post-COVID environment, people working remotely? I just heard you fire off the names of the countries you're in, so I counted at least 3 or 4 time zones. So how do you attribute your growth to all the work that you've done so far? Can you share that
Yeah,
with us?
I think it's a community effort. Being in the Midwest in the fashion business is not
Yeah.
really intuitive. Most of those things are on the coast, and I made a decision to be here for a number of reasons. But
Right.
having a certain expertise in this business has been very, very helpful. I'm on my
Right.
73rd country. I've spent a ton of time overseas. I
Right.
really understand the business as it relates to that. But the team itself that surrounds us also has a pretty high degree of expertise in the world. You talk about human beings messy, now put it on the world scale. And we see
Right.
what's happening all over the world. And in our business, we're affected by that. Every little nuance affects our
All right.
business. And the number of hands involved in producing product is astounding, to say the least. And so, for us, I think what makes us unique is that we have the expertise to navigate a lot of this. I always also believe in evolution, not revolution. We are
Okay.
constantly evolving. Talent and technology are our foundation.
Okay.
I always say, if you're not evolving, when the revolution comes, revolutions are always bloody. And
Right.
so I really always want to make
It's a
sure
great
that
it's
we
a great
never
point.
hit revolution stage, that we do our best to continue to evolve. And that can be sometimes an interesting task, but you want to stay relevant, you want to stay up to speed, you want to understand what's happening in current conditions. And I think our customers respect us for our ability to navigate effectively on their behalf.
Perfect. That is great. So that the growth that you've had, it sounds like an interesting path that you've gone on, and it sounds quite complicated as well. I know that when I took in my graduate studies international business, we don't think about it because the US is a pretty large country, right? And we think about just the regional differences between the South, the Northeast, the West, et cetera. But you start working with other cultures and their beliefs and religion and politics, et cetera. the complexity that we talked about, and employees showing up. We hire employees, but human beings show up. That becomes a multitude of complexity there, I'm sure.
For sure. And, we think of ourselves as a large country, but we're a consumer nation. We're not a
Right,
manufacturing nation. We abdicated
right,
that years ago.
right,
90% of what we get is from China. We're in a pissing contest with them right now.
right,
And the result can be pretty catastrophic for US economy. So, we are, people try to put up borders all the time, right?
right,
They put up walls. We are connected as the world. When our stock market goes up and
right.
down, foreign stock markets go up and down. We are forever linked as a global community. And I think people fail to understand that. They think that tomorrow we could disengage from the world and we would be fine. Yet I was talking with a very large organization that kind of their business is these small little fasteners, a multi-billion-dollar organization. And they said these little fasteners would take 8 to 10 years to build that infrastructure back in the US, and it would be 10 times more expensive. And you don't think about something as small as that affecting so many different businesses. And so, understanding, and so I guess today it's a little bit of a bad word for some people. I disagree heavily, but if you don't understand globalism and you don't understand the connectiveness of people and human beings around the world, you're going to wake up lacking, I think, one day.
Yeah, left behind for
Yeah.
sure. Right. There was a quote. Um, I was in some organizational leadership development things, and I remember this was probably date myself back before around 2000, and the speaker said it. I don't know why he never. I mean, it's if you go Google it, you can't find anybody who quotes it. But he says, if your level of expertise and education is not equal to or greater than your organization's same levels, you will be left behind.
Yeah.
Those are the people who get displaced. And that's an interesting quote, and it's been kind of burned into my head, and I think about that quite a bit. We found out during COVID, obviously, that the smallest minute things, one piece of one thing that you just talked about can hold back orders, because if you got everything except for what you just talked about, the fastener, but you have everything else done, you still can't sell the product.
You still
And
think that we're through that. Go look at the shelves today. It is looking very interesting in the US. It's subtle, but it's growing, and you're seeing lack of service levels, you're seeing lack of fulfillment, you're seeing empty shelves. This is not going to get better, it's going to get worse.
yeah, yeah, I hope hopefully we got companies like yourselves that can bring us out of there. Where's your primary selling markets? Where do you sell primarily, or is it pretty
Primarily,
balanced
it's still in
globally?
the US. We have some business in Europe and a little bit in Asia, but the majority of our business is in North America.
Gotcha.
And it's companies that are medium to large to very large. We've
Mhm.
just recently started a full consulting division, which is exploding. The world, as I said earlier, has gotten pretty messy.
Mhm.
And that's allowed us to onboard really interesting people with niches that want to start new business.
Oh,
And
wow.
when you want to jump into apparel, which doesn't have a big foundation in the US anymore, and
Right.
you want to start a new business, that can be a very costly exercise. And so we've managed to grow a lot of business with these new entrepreneurs that are coming on also. But our sweet spot really is medium to large businesses, iconic brands that have been around a long time, some department store business, uniform, thing like that.
Mhm. Those are an interesting business model that you have there. So you probably saw the transition when you talked about abdicating a lot of the manufacturing, and we also textiles. We abdicated a while back too. So tell us a little bit about that.
1980s. Yeah.
Tell us about that transition tell us about how tell us your experience around that transition from, being a dominant manufacturer, through that transition. Tell us a little bit about that if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I don't go all the way back to that. I was actually working in retail when a lot of the last remnants of manufacturing in the US occurred. There's still
Mhm.
some, of course, in the US. But, in our business, it's the one category, maybe there's more, other people might argue it, but the one category I know of that really hasn't changed. The cost, the MSRPs of apparel haven't really changed with the inflation over the years. So we're constantly pressured with the cost of goods portions, the labor, the raw materials cost. And so, America kind of realized that years ago, and they, those businesses kind of went away as others. We have appliance businesses that went away, and
Right.
China was ever so happy to pick that up in their own industrial revolution.
Mhm.
And around the globe, this continues. Apparel in industrialization is one of the very first steps of industrialization. People realize SAMs and productivity and worker efforts on simple things. And then much like the countries that we know today, Taiwan, Korea, et cetera, they elevate from basic apparel manufacturing to
Right.
appliances to technologies, and their lifestyle improves. And so in our business years ago, we recognized that we were the first to go as America started deciding to build higher levels that could pay higher salaries. Apparel was going to be the
Right.
first sacrificial lamb. And so, in that evolution and along that period of time, those businesses moved to places like China that you would imagine, or Taiwan or Korea.
Right.
And then their economies grew up. And, I started in Africa in 2000, worked my way from the South up, spent 3 years in Ethiopia. There are all these areas that need to experience that industrialization.
Right.
And it's kind of a moving target, to tell you the truth. It's interesting.
That keeps you on your feet for sure. One of the
Or
questions I
keeps
want to
me on a plane for sure.
Yeah, keeps you on a plane. Yeah. Yeah, and we all know the glory of that went away long ago when all the airlines consolidated. It used to be a pleasure to do, to fly and travel and do those things, and today it's not as glamorous as it used to be. It's not as much fun or as glamorous as well.
Yeah, it's still a fascinating thing that you can circumnavigate the globe in hours versus months or
Yeah,
years, but
that
it's
sure is.
not as luxury. It's not as luxurious as it used to be.
Right. So how do you and your company keep up with these trends? I heard you talk about we now do consulting, and obviously you have a lot of experience in this industry. How do you keep up on the trends? Because automakers about every 3 or 4 years they change a model, right? But
Sure.
in the fashion industry, I mean, it changes quickly. How do you keep up with those trends?
Yeah, part of the model does change quickly. Fast fashion and the the portion that you talk about, there is portions of our business that change quickly, but there's also portions of our business that are long-standing, evolving more slowly. There's a big trend to
Mhm.
slow fashion and more basics and
Right.
better quality. But we have teams here that really spend a lot of time searching new trends. We have a lot of dialogue. We've got a lot of people. We have a podcast ourselves called Clothing Culture,
Oh wow.
Coulture. It's listened to by about 100,000 people in 100 plus
Wow.
countries, and it continues to grow, and developing relationships with thought leaders, innovators, disruptors within our industry help us stay on the leading edge of technology and fashion. And technology and fashion, our business is ever linked. I mean, it's amazing how AI is making influence in our business. We started doing 3D design 15 years ago, and less than 2% of the industry is doing it. 100% of what we do is 3D design in-house, but even today it's only 15% of the industry. And so we really try to always be on the leading edge of trend, if you will. We stay a little bit away from fad and fast fashion. Our business is a little more elevated than that.
Gotcha. Excellent. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, so how do you balance your personal life with your business demands? You just talked about spending a lot of time in an airplane, and obviously you're in the Midwest, and we have, when you're some of the more dominant cities like Chicago, New York, LA, there's a lot more flights and availability and everything else. So how do you balance your personal life with your business demands?
Now, Mike, that's a loaded question. Every entrepreneur asks what balance.
Yeah.
And I probably resemble that remark. I'm one of the fortunate people that over 30 years of business, and I really hadn't intended to get in this business 30 years ago, but I
Right.
love what I do. And it's a real challenge to disconnect. I
Right.
live this business. The minute I get home, I get calls from 10 and a half hours ahead and offices in
Right.
Bangalore. And,
Right.
it's a pretty constant thing.
Mhm.
I've years ago, my great grandmother taught me to paint, and I love great food culture. And so I've tried to disconnect and do certain things that would
Right.
take my mind off the business, but I can tell you it's a challenge. For me, balance is not there. I love what I do, so it's always part of my life.
And I think when I look over, my age a little bit, the trends used to be, you had a home phone number and you had a business phone number, you had business hours, you had home hours, and today with these devices that we carry around today,
I,
everybody wants to access us anytime they want, and that makes it a lot more challenging, I'm sure.
and when I'm
But there's
working in
also
multiple time zones, I kind of have to do that, right? You talk about managing people. I'm also managing people in different time zones, and they have to feel as connected as the people that are in the office here. You've got offices overseas, they got a voice too, right? So,
right. Well, and those machines that we carry around too are very valuable because now you can actually video and do all those things you could not do a long time ago. So
you're right.
there's pros and cons to both of those.
Yeah, the old fax days, I date myself, but they'd come in the morning, you'd answer them, and you go home at night, and you wouldn't get them the next morning. I kind of look at those days going, wow, those were good days. I could disconnect because I wouldn't get those till the next morning. But nowadays, that's definitely not the case.
Yeah, today we only see faxes really used at hospitals.
And the
And
Japanese, for some reason, the Japanese culture still I think the number is almost astounding. It's like 80% of their business is still done by fax.
yeah, fax is one of the only one-to-one way or one-to-one communications where it's hard to hack it too. That's one of the
100%.
reasons
That's
why.
exactly why
Yeah,
the Japanese use it.
yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things I'm a member of is the Business Network International BNI. You probably heard of it. It's all over the world and does a lot of networks and referrals, et cetera. And one of the things that we like to talk about is our ideal customer. So who's your ideal customer that you would look at and say, this is my ideal customer?
Yeah, that again is evolving a little bit with our consulting arm, but traditionally it is a medium to large. It's a 50 million to $1 billion customer that understands their business relatively well, has a great following, needs support in terms of manufacturing and or design. We never take all of that pie. We're just a member of the community of suppliers that exist. And I think our expertise helps fill into those blanks that every organization. I worked for a $3 billion organization before I started this, and we always needed help. And so that's the disconnect. You think large organizations have it all buttoned up. It's
Yeah,
usually the opposite today. They're usually teams are stretched and need help. And we weigh in on technical support, design, and manufacturing support with our expertise. The evolution of that is that we found, and it is my passion. I'm not sure it's great for the bottom
right.
line always, but my passion is these startups lately and that new extension, be able to consult with them, help them grow their business, establish long-term goals has been an exciting growth recently for us, certainly.
The last question I would have is, so your ideal referral partner. So if you looked at a referral partner, not necessarily the ideal customer, who's your ideal
Yeah.
referral partner?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So networking and our podcast has been helpful because as we
Mhm.
engage with some of these fashion leaders, like, man, you need to meet this person and you need to meet that person. I remember going back in retail and there were these walls kind of set up for people because there would be 1,000 people calling them all
Right,
the time. And the
right,
ability to kind of circumvent, we had a large department store that
right.
was impossible to get in. And I was brought in to help support a different brand and then subsequently met the ownership and they're like, where the
Yeah,
hell have you been? And
yeah,
you're like, well, I can't get through this way. So, I
yeah,
got to run that way. It's experts in the field. It's people with connections that, we
okay,
call them connectors, people that sit down
right,
and say, man, I know this individual. I know this organization. They have a need for your particular niche. I want to introduce you. So we don't necessarily have salespeople per se. It's difficult. The salespeople run up against obstacles all the time, but experts in the field, people that have connections at the right levels that
right.
can affect that connection are
Yeah,
our deal is that ideal person for sure.
perfect,
We've gotten really far very quickly with the right connector.
perfect. So Brett, tell us again the name of your company. Tell us the best way that someone can get a hold of you and anything else you'd like to close out with.
Yeah, that's great. Stars Design Group Incorporated. We're based here in St. Louis, offices all over. Our website's www.starsdesigngroup.com. Again, we urge you to sign up and subscribe to our podcast, Clothing Culture, Coulture. And then you can certainly approach us via email. You can go onto the site and contact us. My email is Brett, B-R-E-T, @starsintl.net. Our phone number is 314-771-9152. Hey, reach out and we'll connect.
Thank you very much again for being on the Business Spotlight today, and we greatly appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike.